diligence, even with diligent contractors, they won't be aware of how much they're fudging certain things because it's just not. It's out. It's just. There's subtleties. Yeah. Okay. And on the back there's a little documentary series. You can go to the website. A video series about one of the projects.
You're all very good at shutting up when you're anticipating something happening. Okay, is everyone back? Everyone refreshed? And have you had enough coffee for the afternoon lunch slot? I don't want to see anyone nodding off because we will throw stuff at you. Look at you, bet.
I'm standing up so I don't fall asleep.
Keep those sunglasses up. I don't want to see them over your eyes. Great. Any questions burning questions from this morning? We're going to start to sort of hang some actual meat on the bone sort of thing now with real examples and applying this modelling to actual buildings. So great. So this was just for reference, this is the thing that's in the Passive House manual showing, which has got slightly changed recently. It used to be simpler, they've expanded it to give finer levels. But we're taking the house you saw, we showed you the picture of earlier, Ruth's house, and as certified with 0.1, so this is in Alan's list of an acceptable sort of vent rate that's not, being overly optimistic. 0.1 air changes per degree Kelvin difference. So this is, because it's the night vent for summer, it's how many air changes for every 0.1 of a degree difference between inside and outside, because it assumes no wind, it's a still night, hot night, and it's driven by it being cooler outside than inside. So the air's wafting out of the building by buoyancy, okay? And for every 1K difference, you'll get 0.1 of an air change, okay? So we put that in, so that's all within the not fudging it and trying to cheat thing. We're getting the 6 point whatever percent we had in the thing. So everything good. We're in the good range there. Colours don't quite work out. And then if we say there's 5 people, so as I say, there's a sort of granny flat, which her mum, she died and then she rented out. Actually, there's not that many people in the house, but let's say she was living there, she lives on her own, but she could easily have a partner and 2 kids, so 4, plus they've got the rent out the flat with a single person or maybe a couple, and suddenly we got 5 people. It's again not ridiculous, this isn't, family of 12 living in a tiny flat, this is not huge, this is a reasonable sized house and completely sensible levels of occupancy. But now we're getting sort of up to our 10%, and we haven't done anything silly. Then we're saying she uses a washing line at the moment, and that was in her PHPP, but say she can't be bothered doing that, and she wants to have an electric tumble dryer, suddenly that's done that. And then maybe an extra fridge freezer, because the flat needs another, so now there's not one kitchen, they've got another. And these are just little things you put in. Wanted to put stuff in that was sensible, not lava lamp collections and vintage radios and things, but just fairly ordinary stuff. And then because it's noisy and she's on the road and she can't do the 0.1 night vent, suddenly catastrophic. Yeah, this is the same building that's certified, it's a lovely house and she's really happy there and it's great. But if you just tweak these assumptions, so there aren't 5 people and she hasn't got the extra fridge, she's got a little efficient one and she uses the washing line, so she's okay, but it's quite easy. Change of occupancy, suddenly this building that was fine, we're now calling it catastrophic. So this is just some fairly subtle assumptions. We haven't said 100 watt light bulbs, we haven't said, terrarium and tropical lizards and snakes and things with a heater in. This is all really still quite sensible eco stuff, and we haven't said the hot water system's rubbish. Everything's still good. So this is not a passive house. Again, it's not a passive house thing. This is just assumptions, and you'll get similar results if you do this in IES or TAS or Ecotext or whatever. It doesn't matter what model you use. This is just the physics, but it's the assumptions. So the point is, the assumptions are more important than the modelling. So we've got to think, realistically. If you take the worst case for every building, then nothing's ever going to work. You're going to conclude that every building must have air conditioning, because what if there were 10 people and this and that, you would need cooling. So you've got to take some realistic judgment, but that's part of the skill as design. And this comes back to the thing Mark was showing earlier, is first of all working out what are the assumptions, what information can you gather, and then clearly communicating that in writing to the whole design team. So there's some mention, I think I heard Tamsin saying, and you're probably all aware there's this sort of thing in design meetings, everyone's representing their corner. And as the passive house designer or the energy consultant, you're often seen as a sort of passive house police, and you guys say, well, will this work? You know, or what do we meet passive house yet? And it's the wrong approach, because we're all trying to make the building really work, and we're bringing a set of tools and skills and knowledge and experience, and the architect brings their knowledge and experience, and the client's got their, we've got to try and convey what they want and how they live. Everyone's bringing their skills and stuff to the party, and we've got to kind of work together. But so often in design teams, it's kind of everyone's trying to do their bit, and the passive house people are seen as, oh, they're just interested in the primary energy and geeky stuff. But we're actually trying to make a really good building. And then at the end, if we just boost the mechanical vent, it's helped a bit, but it's not. But these are just all the sort of things you can play with.
Can I just ask a basic question about occupancy?
Yeah.
I mean, the way that you've been talking, you're assuming the occupancy pattern that you've got with the current occupants is the valid occupancy. I mean, is that...
We're using default, so there's two things. For certification, we're using a default, which has changed. It used to be 35 square metres per person in PHPP. So if you had a sort of 600 square metre eco mansion, you'd assumed it had 16 people living in it or whatever. The reality is, the bigger the building, the less people. Okay, so if you do a graph, the huge building has got a retired couple and they're skiing in winter and they're in Saint-Tropez and they're never there. Okay, the tiny house is full of families struggling with the kids and the relatives are there and grandma's staying because she's ill. And the smaller the house, the more over the world. That's kind of the graph goes the other way. So PHPP now uses the SAP curve. So in SAP we have this thing, really tiny. You can only fit 1 or 2 people in. Then it kind of levels at about 3 people, and going bigger, you don't really get more people in it.
Right.
So we do use for certification. We use that. But the what if thing, will it overheat? So if it is social housing, you're thinking, look, it's a tiny flat. What if they did, put another? Will it work? It's just having that what if discussion. You've got to realistically think. How's it going to work? So it's the same with any. It's a design problem. It's not a passive house thing. And then, as I say, the sum of ventilation. This was this thing. So the way PHPP calculates, it talks about the equivalent air change. So when we have the mechanical heat recovery ventilation, it's as if you've got 90% heat recovery, it's as if you're only ventilating with 10% of the air. You're actually moving all the air, but in terms of energy, it's like, and it's the same with if you leave the heat recovery on, it's as if you're not ventilating. So you need to turn the heat recovery off. So the equivalent air changes. So if we get there, this is the frequency of overheating. So this building with almost no air change here, it's 35%, and we get down to sort of this is not per Kelvin, this is air changes. 0.6 air change, we're down to 5%. So this is a sort of curve, and it kind of levels out and never gets to 0, but that's for this particular building. This is from Passapedia, it's not our graph. It's just illustrating the impact of the ventilation. But this is the effective air change. So say mechanical ventilation giving a third of an air change, if it's recovering the heat, so the cool air coming in, because generally in this climate the air outside, even in summer, is on average cooler than inside. Now we had the hot spell recently where it was 30 odd degrees outside, but over 24 hours in general it's cooler outside than inside, even in summer. So normally ventilating will generally be a heat loss in summer. It'll help cool. But if the air coming in at night, it's coming in at 10 degrees, and the air going out to 25 because it's been warm in the day, you'll be heating that air up. The MVHR is not doing anything useful. Okay. And the other thing so we've mentioned about the busy road and so on, but also how much does it actually open? So this is a tilt and turn window. So for ventilation, you're going to tend to tilt it, so you get secure draft-free ventilation. The rain doesn't come in, but very often it's in a very tight reveal, and you open it, but the air, you haven't got as much air. And also, what is the gap? It's not that bit at the top, the 100 milli measure there. It's the narrowest point, and then there's a little triangle at the side. So very easy again to sort of be over-optimistic when you put it in the PHPP. If you haven't actually seen the window and measured it or used them on a previous project. So again, experience, being familiar with the product, and ways of installing in your favoured construction type all help. So a little detail we've come up with on the timber frame is we kind of leave a bit at the top. It gives a bit more vent, but also people say, oh, now I can put a blind in there. So then you've got the next house, you go even higher, so you can have a blind and still keep the vent. So again, it kind of iterations of experience.
What that block the vent?
The blind. Yeah, so but you put this higher, so the blind then it still vents behind, yeah, but it's just giving space for that. Otherwise you find it opens and there's not the ventilation you thought. So again, the PHPP, you might enter in the calculation for window vent, you think you've got a 100 mil gap, you haven't, and it's restricted. So again, it's being realistic. Anything else on that? Right. And then innie or outie. So traditionally in the UK, we've had outward opening windows. Typically in Belgium, but Denmark, Sweden, they tend to have outward opening windows. You move to hotter countries, you go to France, Germany, tend to have inward opening windows because then you can use shutters. So you have the shutters shut, which might actually let some air through as well, and you can still open the window. So you go back 200 years, you had inward opening windows. Very tricky to make them weatherproof in the old days, which is why we put our windows on the outside, because it's easier to, before you've got clever seals and good technology, very hard to make an inward opening window stormproof. So in the UK, it was more important to keep the driving rain out than to be able to work your shutters for the heat. So sort of culturally, we've ended up with a different thing. Now with the passive house and the available windows, we're tending to go inward opening, but this is Warm's office in Plymouth. That's what are the windows? Rationale, and they're outward opening. And you get you can really throw the window open. You can get more ventilation with outward opening, but you can't have fly screens or external shades and so on. So there's again pros and cons and cultural issues, whether you have your knickknacks on your windowsill and all those sort of things. So a lot of things to consider. But generally we're working in, and this is in a passive house school. Just picture of friend Tom, it's not his architect's jumper, it was Christmas jumper. I managed to snap that photo and I use it in all the slideshows, which he loves. So we can leave this open, so it's secure, it's insect mesh, you can just leave that open at night, and we've got good ventilation through the through school. So good in schools, hospitals, even the archive in Hereford we've done that, and they're very paranoid about security. And you will see this on home designs, house designs, where people have done this idea with the louvered vents, but I'm saying, why might we not do that on houses, particularly if we're budget conscious? What's the downside for a house?
Heat loss.
Yeah. So when, in terms of...
Well, no solar gain.
Yeah, so you're kind of losing with the window. It's kind of doing a lot. It's giving you daylight, it's giving you solar gain, it's giving you ventilation, it's doing all those things. As soon as you do that, you've lost your solar gain, you've still got your heat loss. So for a school, that's really important. You want to dump all the heat from the kids of the day. You need a lot of ventilation. You've got a lot of heat to get rid of every day. It's worth doing that. You design the building around that. But in the house, it's not an economical way to do that. So you will see it on designs, and it seems sexy, it seems a clever thing, but it's kind of a costly way of doing that. And stays, friction stays. You again, will the window bang in the wind? Can you actually lock it in position? Traditionally, we always could. You had the little thing to do that, but some windows now they're designed just to be open for cleaning or shut or tilt. You can't. This sort of window, you can't leave that flapping. So this one, we open it against the wall. So in the schools, you make sure the window for the night vent is that one and that one over there, so you can leave it open against the wall so kids don't walk into it and bash the face. So a lot of consideration. Again, it's not passive house specific. They're just kind of all the stuff as designers you've got to think about the practicalities, and not having too many. If every classroom's got 3 of these, the caretaker or whoever's got to go and do them all at night and then shut them again. You know, it's a lot of, you've got 50 classrooms in your building. That's a lot of windows, unless you've got the window monitor kid who's trained. The little things to think about. And then this is in PHPP. It's something I've hardly ever used. I probably just discussed this before we came on, but Mike, do you want to talk through that a bit?
Well, yeah. Basically what we've got is on the some event sheet in PHPP, which is the place where you enter all the core information about the ventilation rates. Off to one side there are these 2 tables, and this table looks at everything from a daytime ventilation or 24-hour ventilation point of view. This looks at it from a nighttime perspective, so they're not additive. That's the first thing to note. So basically what we're able to do is we say what proportion of the day is it open? The window's going to be open 24 hours. Is that a reasonable assumption? We've got the PHPP's got some guidance notes that come up over here about what your assumptions would be for the velocity of the wind and temperature difference and likes. and you're entering in a number of windows, and whether it's one room that's been ventilated, or you've got opportunity for cross ventilation in some form, and then it'll spit out numbers which can then calculate over here into basically percentages of an hour that's per Kelvin of ventilation rate. Now the key thing is that when you're this is per Kelvin, but I don't know that one is it?
That
I
you
think
put a
that-
temperature in, don't you? Put a
Yeah.
temperature difference into it. So you put 4. So this is the actual
Yeah.
air changes. So that's
Yeah.
your daytime.
That's
event.
it. So this you're saying that there's a temperature difference between inside and outside during the daytime, but at night time, the PHPP thinks about it in a different way. So
So we'll use the weather file for this one and look at the temperature difference of the average for that month, summer month, what's the day-night swing, and it'll use that to work out, and again, various fudge factors and so on. So it's driven by temperature. Here you've got wind and temperature. Here it's just temperature.
but here what we're saying is that you'd rely, this would be the 0.1 air changes per hour per Kelvin. That's what we can calculate here. Now, because we know that the 0.1 is the constraint that we're doing, all we normally do is we put the 0.1 into the PHPP spreadsheet anyway. But this allows you to work backwards, because what you can do is you can also say, right, I know that I'm trying to target 0.1, so what are the variables that then come out of this? So, is it realistic to expect that the windows are going to be open for 15 hours a day, or do we really have cross ventilation? Maybe we close the doors inside the house, so we don't actually have cross ventilation. It'd be a nice architectural dream that we did, but mum and dad want some privacy, the kids want some privacy, maybe little Johnny's listening to his death metal again, whatever it'll be, but there's reasons why the doors get closed. So therefore, there's a whole host of behavioural things that we can start to think about and see, it's really sort of check out what the realistic assumptions are in our designs. So what have we got? Calculate with PHPP, doors open, we mentioned. Have we got windows in all, openable windows in all the relevant rooms perhaps?
Sometimes people think I'll just open the bedroom window, and this assumes the whole house is ventilated that many edges, because the heat's kind of in everywhere, and that's a common misperception. You think, I'll open the window at night. That's only cooling one room, and you've got to get the whole, because that's then picking heat up. It doesn't actually drop the temperature of the house, because the house is still warm. You've got to get rid of all that heat you gathered into the whole building for the whole day. And again, even for, so say with the dynamic models, we look room by room, but you find with an insulated building, whether it's a school, an office or a house, it all evens out. So if you've got a stairwell that's super glazed in a school or something, or a flat block of flats, that's heat that's going into the whole envelope. That's going to cause a problem somewhere. It's a place where you can't lose, it's not losing heat at night into the corridor and into the stairwell and out. It's heat coming in.
Yeah.
So it's a reality, it's partly the model's very crude and it assumes it's one big lump, but once you've insulated it, it kind of behaves more and more like one big lump. So the model becomes more accurate and more useful.
Yeah, and so you could even get to the one whereby you're rationalising a design, putting openable windows with nighttime vent assumptions into all of the bedrooms, but you've got no ventilation taking place on the ground floor. Now, intuitively, there's some, based on what was just saying there, that something incorrect in terms of it won't actually help reduce the overall building temperature in those significant ways, though it might offer localised benefits for nighttime comfort.
But a common mistake, particularly early on with PHP, people, you're trying to make up a number and you put in 0.3 of an air change, which a third of an air change, it feels believable. When you put that in at night, you just think intuitively, I should be able to get a third of the air every hour. Surely if I open the windows, it must be okay. So they put in 0.3 in the night cooling, and that's 0.3 per K.
Yeah.
And it's assuming there's so much air change that's not happening. We see this with dynamic models. We've seen it with flats, showing 5% overheating in IES or something. But they've put in so much airflow that papers would be blown across the room, and you'd be having to sort of hang on to furniture. It's not happening on a still summer evening. It's not happening.
I think another thing to flag up in that respect is the way that PHPP, a subtlety of PHPP, is it's not flagging up that this is actually per Kelvin temperature difference, per degree Kelvin temperature difference. So you end up with this one whereby you can very easily try and copy that 0.3 into when it's, that shouldn't be right.
Horribly confusing. We make no apologies for it.
It's one of those things to be aware of as a PHPP user.
If you open a window on one side of the house and another one on the other side of the house, you get differential pressure, which actually
If the doors are
Yeah.
open.
What's that?
If the doors are open.
If it's open, this does it, the height, to show the height difference between them.
Right, okay, so
It
it
does
does
do
do
it,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
But again,
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
as Mark says, it's useful as a what if, and what would that mean? You know, to get, and we're saying point one
You
is
know, they're still
concerned.
doing it with doors slamming in the house, don't they? Back,
Yeah.
There's always a bit of a pressure, isn't there, usually?
Yeah, but you can calculate, this will calculate, it's a standard calculation,
Right.
it's just a,
It's one of those, is it?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, the calculation is, you know,
I mean,
if,
It's the same formula from Sibley.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
it's
okay.
kind of, it's kind of,
physics, yeah.
it's physics. It's
Right.
it's not negotiable. Yeah.
But it will be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, but it's the physics might be right, but it's the set of assumptions that support it might not necessarily be quite where you expect
Doors,
it to be.
curtains, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And whether the window really, what is the real window opening, and
So MVHR in summer. So at one point in time, there was an assumption that summer bypass mode wasn't useful, and it didn't really offer as much cooling benefit as it now is recognised to do. So we've kind of come around full circle on that one. Is basically the synopsis of that.
I just say that the physics hasn't changed, but there's an assumption that to get the sort of useful night cooling, you've got to shift a lot of air. But then we found that people can't do that anyway because they don't have that much window opening or whatever it is. So we found we needed to use more modest amounts. We need to design a building that will work with more modest ventilation. And then suddenly we realised the MVHR was able to do that and was actually significant. And it didn't have the problem. You still open the window, but if you shut the window, like we say with passive house, it's not that you can't open the window, it's you can shut it. So if you had a situation that it is noisy or there's insects or something, will it work with the window shut? It's a good stress test. Now, not all buildings are going to do that. If you've got over a certain amount of glass and a certain climate and so on, it isn't going to work just with MVHR, but it is worth looking at. We've got buildings where we reckon they'll be fine with just MVHR.
Yeah. And if you can make it fly with just the MVHR as the core assumption on summer bypass, then it's going to be fairly rock solid, shall we say, because there's all these other things that you know which will happen in reality. Remember, this is design, not reality. So therefore, you know that in reality, people will open some windows, but that's okay. That's in addition to. But so it's just understanding how to use PHPP as a design tool, as a way of sort of being able to guide that gut instinct for what kind of risk have you got that you're dealing with. And
the thing, it's got to be with, we'll come on to automatic bypass, you've got to have automatic, as we said, if it's still recovering the heat, then the hot air going out, which will be warm because it's summer, the temperature has crept up, it will be warming the cool air coming in. You've got no benefit, almost nothing. It's like not having the ventilation happening at all. So you've really got to have that bypass, which we'll cover in a bit more detail.
Okay.
And I say this isn't cooling in the sense of 3 kilowatts of aircon. This is just keeping it steadily, and it's running 24/7. You're not having to think, oh shit, I was away, I didn't close the windows, I was away for the weekend, I came home. It just tick over, you don't have to think about it, which is really good.
Yeah.
So this is illustrative. This is Alan. He's put data loggers on his own MVHR when he installed in his house using Open Energy Monitor. See if I can work this out. So the intake. This is the air as it's coming in. So you can see as it's going up, it's getting warmer. It's a bit like outside air. The blue is the supply air. That's what you're putting into the room. Sorry, blue is the supply air. The exhaust is the air going out. So that's kind of. So gone. Does that work?
Yeah.
Exhaust the air going out. This is 30 degrees, and that's coming out at the outside of the after the heat exchanger. Okay, that's not the air in the room going out. That's when it's gone through the heat exchanger and coming out. And that's it. An extract. So the extract is really the air in the house. So that yellow is that's the stuff that's being sucked out of the rooms. And then you can see the supply. So the supply air here, it's cooler. So the air here is coming in, and what it's doing there, it's cooling. Bypass is happening here. So we're not recovering any heat. So the cool air is just coming straight in. It's going past the heat exchanger. That's great. We want cool air because we're a bit too warm. We're over 21 degrees or whatever we've set the MVHR at. So the extract air you see is coming down. So the house is getting cooler. That's night time. Okay, it's getting cooler anyway. And then the changeover happens here, and then suddenly the intake's warming up. And what happens here is the intake. So the air should be coming in at 30 degrees because it's hot outside. What's actually happening is the air going out is cooling the air coming in. So it's like the heat recovery in winter in reverse, and that's really nice. So we're getting the air coming in. So this is supply air, the blue. It's a little bit warmer, but it's cooler than the outside air. So the outside air is up here, and the air's coming into the building cool. So it's done that. So in hot climates, you want heat recovery. So in summer, because it's always been a thing, it's better to have the air coming in with the heat going out. And the same with recovering moisture, drying the air coming in. But in the UK, generally, if you had to choose, you'd decide to not recover it in summer, because generally it's cooler outside. So you disable it. So before we had automatic summer bypass, you'd physically take the heat exchanger out and put a blanking thing in. So it would work in so you don't get the benefit of this cooling in the day, but you get the nighttime cooling. And overall, that's more useful. This was an unusual hot spell. So you managed to log the day when it went above 30 degrees. I think this was last summer, wasn't it? So you just sort of, that's a snapshot of showing that. In other climates, this is happening every day. If you're in a really hot climate, every day you're air conditioning inside, you're always cooling the air coming in. That's a useful thing. It's heat recovery in reverse. But in the UK, it's only in the heat spell that you get to see this happen. So he's got this magical snapshot of when it was actually hot outside. Does that make sense? The nice thing is you don't have to think about it. So we've just installed Zender MVHR in our house as a retrofit thing. My partner was very unconvinced, and then I went away for 2 weeks and came back and said, "It's brilliant." And this was in spring. I thought it was only really going to kick in next winter when we were sort of better air quality in winter and all that sort of thing. But it was just, even in this weather, we're noticing the benefit. And we still open the windows at night and do all that, but it's giving that constant flow of air into the bedroom and so on. It's keeping the house cooler, and it's working. But it's been really exciting waiting for the first bit of summer for the little light to come on saying that summer bypass was working, and then seeing the heat recovery happening. But I haven't logged mine yet.
Exciting.
You
Yeah, sad man.
I should get out more. Any questions on that?
I have one, which is to do with humidity.
Yeah.
Are the units, because they don't have any condensate in the MVHR units, do they? They don't have any way to collect fluid.
Yeah.
Do they?
So most normal this isn't
Yeah.
good, but normal sort of heat exchanger, flat plate heat exchanger MVHR units have a drain. So in winter, and even this time of year, when you have really cold night air coming in, that could cool the hot, humid air going out, and you could get condensate happening. That's got a drain. Okay, so you have condensate. It's got a drain. The only exceptions are thermal wheels, which are really mainly for bigger, like schools and so on. You can get domestic, and there the condensation happens, but it kind of gets recovered. They don't have a drain. The nice thing about the thermal wheels is, so this is going slightly off topic, but when you've got, in winter, you really, unless it's really cold, it's quite good in winter. We worry about mould and damp in our houses, and that's the main reason for needing to ventilate. We want to reduce the relative humidity in winter so we don't get mould and condensation. But if it gets really cold outside, and if you're in Austria or somewhere it gets cold regularly, but if it gets to sort of -5, -10, the air coming in hasn't got a lot of moisture in, and we start to get the air's a bit dry. And in offices and schools where you're doing a lot of ventilation, and you're not showering and bathing and drying, washing, but you've got a lot of ventilation because a lot of people not generating a lot of moisture, the air could get a bit dry, and you go into offices and you see the sandwiches curling up on the table and turning into crispy toast without changing colour, and it's just like magic. But that's the dry air in winter because of the cold air coming in with very little moisture. The thermal wheel, when it gets condensing, the condensation happens in the wheel, and then that water comes back into the building, so you get this moisture recovery, which kind of works quite nicely. And you can do a special type of heat exchanger which lets water vapour move through it. And again, in humid climates, you do that because the air going out, you've dehumidified and you've cooled it, so the air coming in is hot and moist, and you transfer the moisture from the incoming air to the outgoing air, yeah? So the exhaust then is now warmer and wetter, yeah? So you're kind of doing the opposite way around to what we're imagining here. But it works in reverse. So you're drying the air coming in. So if you're in Japan or somewhere, that's where, and in winter it's working the other way around. If it's getting really cold, then you're recovering the moisture. So it's a bit off topic, but yeah, it's condensation. And the thing about the bypass is, so you can put, this is in the ventilation sheet. So this is where you put the night ventilation, the 0.1 we were talking about per Kelvin. There's, it's confusing because these things, as Mark said, they don't all add up, and you've got to really watch yourself. The good news is if you're using very conservative assumptions, you put very little in. You say, no night vent, we'll see how that goes, and we'll put in, so we might boost the mechanical vent. So we want to open the windows. We're not saying don't open the windows, we're just saying what happens if people don't? will it be okay? We're not saying don't open the windows by any means. Open them. Listen to the birds. You know, have the fresh air, feel the wind on your face. Do it, definitely. But if you don't, what happens? So if we put in, we might boost it, and it says, and it's a bit, they talk about for hygienic reasons, which is very unclear what they mean by that, and even if you ask them, but they're saying 1.5 times, and they're saying maybe people get a bit sweaty in summer. So if you boost your MVHR in summer, you put in 1.5 times your vent rate, you can do that. The thing is, what we found is the MVHR isn't perfectly bypassing. You're still getting a bit of heat recovery. It's still, you know, picking up some heat on the way, so it's not 100% effective. There's still a bit of accidental heat recovery. So again, in the rules of thumb guide, you have to memorise this. In the Passive House Trust rules of thumb guide, this is one of the things that's flagged up. So again, it's kind of a bit fudgy, but we might kind of say, well, we've boosted it, but there's less recovery, so we kind of end up back where we started. So we might have 1/3 of an air change or 0.4. But it's something you can play around with, and if you start putting that up to a lot more air change, you've got to think, what is the airflow in my ducts? How big is the fan? Are we off the curve? We're using lots of electricity to do this. But this is all design stuff you can do. And if you're looking at, you know, flats in places where there's lots of noise and security risks on, you start playing around with this and seeing what, but it won't deal with acres of glass. This isn't air conditioning, this isn't cooling. This is just, with a very well designed building, it can just make it all work. So we're trying to get a building that'll just need just tweaking just a little bit, keep the heat out, give a bit of boost the vent a tiny bit, and make it all sail through. But you've got to get the gains right down for that to work. Yeah? None of this is going to solve an overheating-y building, okay? But it will give you a chance to make a very simple, easy to work, just fit and forget. Go out, don't have to think about anything, it'll just work, it'll feel lovely. It's just like a house in a perfect climate. Just does it, looks after itself. And that's kind of the holy grail, but that comes with some constraints, as we'll see. Anything else to say on that one? When you've got to tick boxes here and
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's just the sheet you've got to fill in. And again, you can accidentally fill in the wrong stuff and think, oh, fine, we've got, that's one of the things to watch, is you don't accidentally kid yourself that you've got this brilliant house with 0% overheating because you put in half an air change here and you know, did something, you just put in unrealistic assumptions, okay? The certifier should pick that up. And that's part of this process has been sort of tightening up on certification criteria in the UK.
Yeah, that's why we need certifiers, isn't it, Kev?
Kim started that going, changing colours, we talked about it. Yeah, so summary about that is, yeah, open the windows, brilliant. Just dump all that heat. It's really cheap, simple, uses no energy, great, but it comes with problems. As we've said, beware of this night vent. It's per Kelvin and no wind speed. And care of filling in a little bit in all the boxes and adding up to 6 air changes, because it's confusing how it's in PHPP. I have to look at the manual every time to check that. And there's a mechanical vent, you know, increasingly that's something, certainly on the projects I'm working on, and Alan's working on, and Mark's working on, we're sort of, yeah, just seeing what, we've got the MVHR anyway, what will it usefully do? And if that sorts our overheating, then we know we've got a really robust building. And we've got some slack there. Yeah? Any questions on? We sort of have to make it complicated, then make it simple again, because I'm never filling in a lot of this stuff. We're sticking with very simple rules, so I'm trying to make it easy. I'm in for an easy life, but we kind of have to explain what happens if you do go off piste and all the things that can get complicated to come back to a simple place. And we'll show some case studies of simple building.
Yeah, it's like having you've got to understand the terrain that you're in, so that you know that you're on the right route. You know, that's what we're doing. We're sketching out that terrain.
A bit more windows.
Something I'm just getting a little confused with
Yeah.
when I'm
Okay.
filling these in at the moment is the table to figure out the daytime ventilation and the night ventilation. I've got my head around that. But the figure to go into the air change rate.
Which one?
The top one.
Or the 1.5 times wind
That one, yeah.
Yeah.
Where does that?
Well, if you get on the ventilation sheet for your MVHR, basically bring in the one from your MVHR, your 0.3 air changes per hour or whatever it would be, 0.3, 0.4. Bring that in. This is the bit that we've still got to work with. You've got to work with your suppliers with, because normally historically we'd have said the running the MVHR on boost mode would have been how you'd size an MVHR system, but it might be you've effectively got 3 figures. We're talking